I'm very excited to welcome the authors of Assembling Tomorrow, a guide to designing a thriving future. They're from the Stanford Design School. Scott Dorley and Carissa Carter. What's up there?
How are you, Mark?
Look at you
Thanks for
guys. You
having
look
us.
good. That's Stanford life's a good life, huh? Man. Beautiful campus and you're there in the design school. That's like with all these creative people. You're incubating all that creativity all the time. I love it. So I was kind of mentioning it's sort of the sci-fi nightmare, that the HAL in 2001 goes crazy. There are any number of Ex Machina was a great movie that kind of discussed sort of that same thing where an intelligent robot essentially grabs enough intelligence to take over the scene. We're seeing a lot of that. We're seeing it with AI, but I think you guys sort of broaden our perspective on these issues involving technology. Is that it? Oh, Carissa, I can't quite hear her. She muted? No,
I
she's
can
not.
dive in. I can dive in while Carissa works
Yeah.
up tech issues.
Go ahead, Scott. Yeah.
Yeah, we're actually we have a moniker for this era that we haven't really talked about to many people. We could be breaking news here, which is that we call it the transformation age. We feel like there's this moment that's different than what happened in the industrial era, that's different than even what happened in the information age, where the technologies that we're building with are actually transforming sort of the way the world works, the relationships that we have with technology, the relationship between technology and nature. And if you think about it, computers are now doing cognitive work for us. They're doing creative work. I don't know if for us is the right way to put it, but they are capable of doing it. And then with synthetic biology, which we call artificial evolution, it's speeding up the way nature evolves, right? So these are fundamental changes. And part of the book is just trying to call attention to the fact that there is a fundamental change going on. And then you see it, in the way politics are going. You see it in the way the climate is changing. You see it in the way people are worrying about work in the future. And it's a really big time that could be very daunting. And what we'd like to do is kind of look at it straight in the face and figure out, well, what kind of agency do we have here? What can we do about it? How can we approach it in a way that's going to bring us together rather than tearing us apart?
It's interesting because you do work in this design field at Stanford, and you talk about runaway design. I mean, this is what I was getting to when I was saying it's more than just kind of the HAL computer going after it or Ex Machina. You really begin to point out a bunch of different areas whereby technology is having an effect and it's an unintended effect.
Yeah, it seems to be that the fundamental thing about these new technologies is that they can change after we make with them, right? So, you build a car, it has a lot of impact on the world. It gets you around, it puts carbon into the air, but it doesn't fundamentally change after you build it. These technologies actually have the tendency to change. And that's what we mean by runaway design. It's like maybe we're going to let these things get away from us. And we have to think about how we're creating with them differently. So we teach students at Stanford. We also work with, executives, nonprofit leaders, teachers, and try to figure out how can you approach building with these technologies in a way that allows you to be responsive, because they will kind of break and they will not work out perfectly. So you need to be able to respond. You need to have room to pull them back. We need to think very differently about how we're working with these things.
It's fascinating for the very reason that I think all of us are hip to ChatGPT or whatever it is when it comes to that kind of technology, which is clearly transformative on its own. But when you do ChatGPT, you realize, 20% of what it said is kind of just BS. And you're thinking, because all I hear about is, my AI is going to just, you won't even deal with the doctor anymore. The chart will be looked at by AI, and it'll tell you exactly what, and it'll give you a prognosis, a diagnosis, and it'll prescribe medication for you. Really? Well, it better be better than ChatGPT, because that's 20% off from what I can see pretty consistently. So you point to this, as I say, in other ripple effects. And it is kind of cool how you guys do it. I wonder if you, Carissa Carter, could you tell me, is it you make these points about technology, but then you draw out scenarios in the book, I think. Isn't that how it works?
Do I work? Do I
Yes,
sound
you're working
yay?
well.
All right.
Yes.
I was preparing a sign about like technology sucking to be able to
It's
hold
so
up in case
ironic.
it didn't work.
That would have been
um,
great.
I know, you love when this kind of tech issue happens when we're talking about tech. In our book, we actually paint fictional stories across this not very nonfiction book that talks about how tech and nature are intertwining. But we have these speculative fiction short stories dotted throughout, and we do that because using our imaginations to try on possible futures to see if we like them and see how, like, do I like how I show up in this future where I've resurrected a loved one from, beyond the grave? Like, that's starting to exist in today's world, but if we use fiction to bring ourselves there, we can try on more things before they happen.
Yeah, I think it's a really innovative, inventive way to tell the story. So, can you give me an example of like one of those, maybe one of those short story kind of the fictional narratives that are embedded in the book, or maybe another one that you feel is illustrative? I'd love to hear something that speaks to this technology you talk about.
Scott, do you want to tell the Apple story?
Sure, yeah. One of the stories we have is called Apple Attacks the Amazon, and we're talking about the company Apple and the jungle Amazon. And the idea there is because these companies are able to bring in so much data and then able to find so many valuable patterns in the data and then able to turn those patterns into income, we've actually got a situation where we have companies now that are worth more than countries and actually even have more expendable cash than countries. And so, are we creating a situation where those companies then will have to intervene in the ways that governments have intervened in the past? And actually, it's clear that they already are, right? Like we have private rockets, we have companies that are building low income housing around here, we have companies with bus lines. We have companies with daycare, they're all taking on what used to be the realm of government. And what we're saying is, as these technologies take over, they shift the way power works. They shift the way, how much money goes into different parts of the economy. And it brings into question everything. That's why we think of it as the transformation age. So in that story, Apple goes down and surveys the Amazon rainforest as a way to save their customer base from climate change.
That's just wild. Well, that takes a right turn, I have to say. I didn't expect it to end with saving their client base from climate change. Are tech companies better intended from the standpoint of their board? Are their intentions better than, let's say, a typical corporate type environment? I don't know. We'll say Wall Street, or you could go fossil fuels. I think that the reason I didn't pick fossil fuels, it's so clearly a negative thing. But Wall Street, management of money, those big companies are, we feel like we know the Googles and Apples that you mentioned, even the Amazons, but are they inherently better, or the reality is, hey man, those tech bros, they'll knock your knees out just like any other corporate board?
I mean, I think most humans in most companies have positive intentions, right? We are all attempting to put what we think is something positive into the world. And I think that everybody's work has unintended consequences that are both positive but also negative. And I don't think we do a great job of noticing those negative consequences.
The When I hear the tech ninjas speak, you're probably, you're so close to them there at Stanford. You probably are so used to them. And I love that you're in design, because as I say, it's just got to be an exciting place as you incubate all of these different ideas for design and society. But sometimes I just feel as though they have their own jargon. I know a handful of like very big ones, really powerful people in Silicon, and I listen to them talk, and they have their own jargon, and they've created their own little world. It's sort of like what you're talking about, and they're taking care of themselves, I think, in certain way. And their sense of society, I think, is skewed as a result of their wealth and perspective. So it's hard for me to imagine putting my future, as just a member of the populace in the hands of people like that.
I mean, I think the main thing to realize is that we all have our own skewed perspective. There's a huge chunk of the book that just talks about how little we actually are able to experience and see. And I think the driving point that we like to, focus on is that everyone has a limited perspective. We need everyone's perspective. You're bringing up a really important point where there's a small group of people creating things that are going to have a huge impact on society. And we just know how that's going to go, right? We know that that's not going to work out. So expanding the amount of people that actually have a voice is really important. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to be a technologist. As a matter of fact, technologists in particular, people who are working to develop technology, they often get clouded by the potential of that technology, right? They get so excited about what it can do that they can lose sight of what it should do. And what it should do, what the impacts are, what the effects are, we are the experts in that, all of us, right? We are the ones who are experiencing that. And we need to create ways that it's not just, sort of one small group of people creating.
I only have a minute or two left, but I want to ask you a kind of practical issue, to speak to a practical issue and address a practical problem. I think you do that in your book clearly, and you have a bunch of things that I, clearly wouldn't have even considered. I mean, it sounds like it's really intriguing, but I'm curious as you speak about technology and about decisions we make around technology, how you digest the desire now on the part of certain school districts to have kids surrender their phone and their devices when they go into school for the day. It seems clear to me that that's a good policy. I mean, these are super distracting, net negatives by far in their lives probably. And yet they feel tethered to those devices the way we all do. And so it takes an edict of that sort to handle it. I'm wondering where you stand on personal devices, bringing kids up with personal devices, and on the schooling, and actually essentially outlawing it during the school hours. Carissa?
Oh, this is a very real life for both of us. I mean, I have kids that are coming of age, like middle school-ish, right? So this is the time when that's happening. And it's hard because it's really hard to opt out of technology right now, right? And it's hard as a parent to clearly make a decision that means that your children won't be participating where other people are. Yet we also see the harm of being connected on social media and how easily that can spiral into something. So I don't think it's an easy decision, and it's one that I struggle with daily, and we're holding off as best we can in some ways, and in other ways not. haven't done great.
Do you try to limit their screen time? Is that what you do?
It's just not that simple, right? Like, we love to say limit the screen time, which I think works when your kids are real little, but then it's like what's happening on the screens. And now that the screens are intertwined with our personal relationships, and that does start to happen in those middle grades, like that's different than just screen time. And Scott's kids are a little bit older, so you could even offer a expanded perspective there.
Scott?
Yeah, I think the thing that you're pointing out, Mark, I think is so important, is this is a collective thing that we have to deal with. It's not just up to the personal responsibility of the parents or the kids, because there are, social pressures. There are things that the kids have to do to deliver for school. So if a school is not blocking phones, maybe they're delivering homework on phones, so phones are out all the time, and then that becomes a distraction. So it really is a collective effort, whether that's cultural or regulatory or rules in schools. It definitely needs a collective component.
Yeah, it really feels as though that's where the shoe pinches with a lot of what you're talking about, which is technology in real life and the ripple effects. Wow, your book has received all kinds of great reviews. Assembling Tomorrow is a dazzling, disturbing, optimistic, and relentlessly useful gem to help you shape the future by understanding the past. I'm especially smitten with how Carter and Dourley weave in histories of the future, thought-provoking flights of fancy that explore how everything from sibling rivalry to sexuality to the Amazon rainforest just might have evolved 70 years from now. Very good, guys, and a lot more. I'm excited about getting into the book myself. Again, the book, you see it there, Assembling Tomorrow, A Guide to Designing a Thriving Future, from the Stanford Design School, ninjas, Scott Dourley and Carissa Carter. How exciting to have you guys here. Thank you very much, and I wish you the best with the book. Please stay in touch. I think these tech conversations can be provocative, even if you don't have a book to sell.
Thank you, Mark. Great to be here.
Yeah,
Okay.
thanks for having us, Mark.
Thanks, guys. All right. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.